This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. My listeners know all too well that one of my personal gods in the English is the English filmmaker Michael Powell. In fact, Powell said of his own experience in film, "I live cinema. I chose the cinema when I was very young, and from then on, my memories virtually coincide with the history of the cinema. I'm not a director with a personal style. I am simply cinema." Many of us as cinephiles can relate and identify with the maestro's words, and my guest today may be the loudest voice in the room when speaking about his love of film, because his life was formed as a young man through cinema and television. His first job was as an usher at the Showcase Cinema in Coventry. He was 17. I am speaking of Ben Roberts, CEO of the British Film Institute, the institution that holds the largest film archives in the world. I can only imagine now that Ben Roberts is a kid in a candy store. I recently heard his presentation on behalf of the BFI at the TCM Film Festival. The British have landed, and with Ben Roberts, we are in sure hands. His presentation also included the able support of filmmaker extraordinaire Guillermo del Toro. For 1 hour, listening to them both, I was transported out of the TCM Festival and on to another plane. They had me at Powell Pressburger, while Del Toro's channeling of the Michael Powell magic was expressed poetically. But Ben Roberts' realization of the Powell Pressburger project, Cinema Unbound, that the BFI has toured in the UK and the US, has made exposition to the fact that the BFI knows how to celebrate a winner. Ben Roberts, it is such an honor to have you on Center Stage with me. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Pamela. And I'm glad you got to hear that conversation with Guillermo because that felt very special for me too.
Every year when I come to this film festival, there is always a moment or a presentation that is so extraordinary to me that it lifts me above the film festival, literally. And for me, it was that presentation.
Oh,
I
well.
and don't take this wrong, but there's just something about the English, and because I've lived there, we just work in England on a different level. And you brought that to the film festival, and I really admired it.
Well, it was really lovely that we had our head of conservation from the Conservation Centre for the Archive in the room that day, a guy called Kieran. And he sent me a message afterwards saying that was really moving to be able to see the work of the archive played back to such an appreciative, curious audience, like
Yeah.
the TCM audience as well. I felt we were telling our story for the first time somehow. It was lovely.
You were. That was palpable in the room. And that really struck me because you stood up and said, the BFI is coming to America. And I thought, okay, are we going to see you now on streaming? Are you going to be connecting with any major studio? Is there something afoot here?
Well, we have a long standing relationship with the US, both as the BFI and as the UK. I mean, as you know, and as someone who's lived in the UK, a lot of US movies are made in the UK. And our filmmaking talent from both sides of the pond has traveled back and forward extensively for decades.
Yeah.
So it's not an it felt like the first time, but it's not really the first time. But we feel that we want to tell that story of transatlantic collaboration better and more loudly and proudly, which is why Guillermo and I started that conversation with Hitchcock,
Yes.
because Hitchcock is a filmmaker who started his career in the UK. He was born in the East End of London, but he's commonly known for his big American thrillers. So we wanted to, take his career back to step one as someone who's had a fantastic career both in the US and the UK.
And you did that by observing his silent films, which, TCM has a long history of curating silent film. And I thought that was such an interesting connection. And actually, the way you presented it was really riveting. I mean, to have all of us reminded about Hitchcock's silent film process.
Well, it's such a fascinating story, both his journey towards the States and how he formed himself as maybe the greatest director of thrillers.
Mhm.
But it's also a fascinating story how those films themselves needed to be researched and rediscovered and pulled together from lots of different sources around the world. And our team then had to go through a process of repair and scanning and digitization and we realized in that process that one of his films is lost for good. Maybe not. So that speaks volumes about the importance of good film preservation,
Right.
because how terrible that an entire feature film made by Alfred Hitchcock has been lost for good.
Oh, that would be a tragedy indeed, indeed. So I want to take this back just a little bit to your journey. You grew up as a kid in Coventry, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's in the middle of England. It's, middle.
Middle. I love it. It's a beautiful place. And how did you get turned on, or how were you seduced by film and the visual arts initially?
Well, I guess I have my parents to thank
Mhm.
because they took us to the movies
Mhm.
and that from quite a young age. So that feels like a real privilege that they formed a habit in us. It's quite pertinent being here for TCM and TCM opening with Empire Strikes Back because I'm of such an age, born in 1975, where watching Empire Strikes Back in the cinema is my first memory of watching a film in the cinema. And I only remember the last 10 minutes when Luke Skywalker discovers that Darth Vader's his father and his hand is chopped off by a lightsaber. And I found it so sort of terrifying and overwhelming. When you're that age, you remember cinema screens being so enormous. I mean, they were enormous, but I remember them being particularly enormous. So I think that imprinted something on me very early that I couldn't get this experience anywhere else.
How fantastic.
And then I stayed with it. I was hooked.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's interesting perspective because mine is that in 1977, I queued up to watch Star Wars A New Hope. And do you know what? It was a new hope for all of us in America. We'd just come out of the Vietnam War. We
Mhm.
needed something like that to lift us. And I remember being so overwhelmed by this movie that I saw it 13 times in 1 week.
Wow.
But like what you're speaking about, the whole presence of going to the cinema, that darkened theater, having that experience, how it leaves this impression on you. For me, it was life altering. And I never looked at cinema the same. I'd always loved classic film before that time.
Mm.
But so you and I share something there in the George Lucas
Yeah, that's
canon.
very special.
That's
And
beautiful.
I think just sort of talking about Star Wars, where we have a we have a print of Star Wars: A New Hope, which we're going to screen in London next month, which is a release print of Star Wars from 1977,
Very,
which has been kept in fantastic condition in the archive. And last night at the Egyptian, we screened a very similar quality print of Jaws. And that was also really special for me because as I said in my presentation last night, Jaws and I share an age. We're both 50 this year.
oh,
And that means that I didn't see it on release in cinema. I watched it for the first time when the BBC showed it 6 years later on Christmas Day. It's
what
not really a Christmas movie, but there you go. And so we screened this print, which is in absolutely perfect condition, and it was like a time machine.
wow.
It took you back to the experience that the audience would have had at the time. Really, really magical.
I can imagine. So that was rich that you had to share, and Lorraine Gary was there. I'm sure sharing wonderful stories. I was standing outside, still queuing, trying to get in, and
Oh,
didn't
I'm
make it.
sorry about that.
However, I had the impression because there was a lot of security and a lot of secrecy about who was being left let in that I fancied that maybe Steven Spielberg showed up for the affair and many executives. Am I close?
He did not, but it was on the cards. So he was next door because the AFI were giving their tribute to Francis Ford Coppola at the Dolby. So TCM had organized the timing of the screening so that if it worked out, he would swing by on his way into the Dolby. And I guess it didn't quite work out. But Lorraine Gary was more than enough. She was fantastic. She had stories to tell. She was very funny. She talked about the actors she got on with and the actors that she didn't.
And
And
I could,
again, fantastic for me to be sharing a stage with this actress who, at the age of 6 or 7,
yeah.
I was sort of watching on TV.
See, you're still that kid in the candy store, like I said in the intro. You've got the best job in the world, Ben Roberts.
Well, I think I probably do. And also, I think what I love about movies and revisiting old films is that it makes us all kids in candy stores
Yeah.
because that's one of the great pleasures and powers of cinema is that it's a very bonding and unifying experience, but it's also a really personal experience. While you're sitting there, you think about yourself and your relationship with what's on screen, and if it's something you may have seen years and years ago, does it remind you of a version of yourself? I just think that I'm such a evangelist for revisiting films and saving them because I think it has such a powerful impact on the self.
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And our collective consciousness inside a movie, I feel it's a very powerful force. For those at the TCM festival, I think one of the greatest attributes is that people from all over the world come here to share their love, not only of film, but the art of preservation.
Mm.
And I know that that is something the BFI actually holds most dear.
Yes, preservation is a lot more than keeping something safe on a shelf.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot of shelves at the BFI. So we have an enormous National Archive. The BFI National Archive is 90 years old this year, and it's one of the largest, most significant in terms of what it holds, significant collections of film and TV in the world. And the work is complex because you need to hold on to material in certain environmental conditions. Film can be quite vulnerable to the environment.
Yes.
So can videotape, and so can digital files as well. So it takes quite an army of film conservation specialists in sort of deep in the English countryside, working away in sort of two different facilities on all manner of material, paper material as well as film material. And where we can, we try to bring films back up to their original condition. So there's holding films in their existing condition, and then we move into restoration work or remastering work, which is about bringing films back up to a condition. And it is an absolutely a skill. I wouldn't call it a dying art, but it is an important area that needs investment in terms of jobs and people who will continue to do film preservation work. So we're very focused on that.
Oh, that's so exciting, Ben. Did you ever see yourself in this position as a young man getting into the film business?
Well, no. I mean, you can't dream of being able to sit on a stage and chat with Guillermo del Toro or introduce a print of Jaws at the Egyptian in Hollywood. Those are not dreams I had, or could have dreamed of having. But I was always the BFI has always been very important to me because as someone from Coventry where film culture was a bit more sparse, the BFI was a had a bit of a siren's call. And in fact, when I was first exploring how I might get a job in film after I graduated from college, I drove down to London and I went to the BFI's library because the BFI used to publish a handbook which would print lists of all the film companies operating in Soho and wider London. And I took a load of addresses and phone numbers from that book and I set about applying for work. So I always knew in my mind that the BFI was the sort of the knowledge hub, the
Yeah,
center of gravity that I had to head towards. So I guess it was in my destiny.
that's fantastic. How clever of you to have done that. How proactive.
Well, I was very driven because I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
working in film. It just seemed so um I was very single-minded about that. And I did, and the film industry is very hard to understand how you might get a job in it. Lots of people think about making films, but the business of film is enormous.
Mhm,
Uh,
it is.
so I've worked in the business of film all my life, and when I came to the BFI, I've been able to combine the business of film with the art of film in a really unique way because we're also we do many things at the BFI, but we're also a government body. So we also look after the state of the film industry in the UK. So we're very much living as I said in my presentation with Guillermo, we really see ourselves as bridging the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah, yeah. And it needs a deft hand to really deal with the government, doesn't it? I mean, you have money allocated to you by the lottery. And that sounds very exciting to me, a very positive usage of these funds. And it says to me that the government has a conscience about the preservation of film. Just
Yes, well,
you
in the
science here.
In the well, look, we have two. I mean, the UK and the US have very different models of kind of funding the arts. Um, in the UK, we are lucky. We get government grants, and they don't cover all our work, but they cover some of our work. The National Archive is a national collection in the same way that the British Library and the British Museum and the V&A are national collections. So there is a responsibility to make sure that those collections are looked after responsibly. We are a lottery distributor, which is another great quality of the UK funding of the arts that we give money. We don't receive that money. We receive that money to give it out to
Mhm.
filmmakers and other archives.
Exciting.
But one of our challenges is that the philanthropy model in the UK is not as powerful as the philanthropy model in the US, which I think has probably been built in the absence of a lot of government grants. So we have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah, yeah, very exciting. I understand that when you took this job, that it was just pre-COVID. And
Mm.
here you had all these big ideas and you had a 10-year plan, and boom, suddenly the music and the visuals stopped. And I know there were very heavy restrictions in the UK with regard to being outside and traveling. Did you just kind of come into this and throw your hat in the air and go, well, let's do what we can? I mean, to get through this?
Yeah, let's do what we can. It was quite an adrenalizing time
Hmm.
for me because I think I was probably only 3 or 4 weeks into the job.
My God.
And we were about to run an edition of our LGBTQ festival, BFI Flair, which is a very big, popular in-person festival. And we had to very quickly move that festival online. And everything changed. I mean, everything, the films that were being made in the UK, the way as the BFI operates cinemas, our cinemas closed down. But I think we learned a lot about reaching audiences in uh, more and different ways. And it's really benefited how we've transformed our digital reach.
Mhm.
And we have held on to that digital reach. But we've also seen on the other side of COVID enormous enthusiasm for special events and rare opportunities and unique moments and in person. And I think that if you run cinemas that screen classic films and you have a lot of filmmakers who like coming to your cinemas, and you'll have heard Guillermo talk about how much he loves visiting the BFI.
Yes.
That has been really good for audiences, and we've seen audiences of all ages coming back to our cinemas, and they've been enjoying a whole range and diversity of films from the silent films right through to the most exciting new releases. So I have a lot of hope for cinema.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too. I think it is the medium of our time. And with you giving money out to independent filmmakers and young filmmakers, this is particularly exciting. But I do worry a bit myself, especially sitting here in America where our political access has turned on a dime.
Mm,
And I'm worried every day, or maybe I even weep every day.
mm.
And I'm just wondering if you are foreseeing any difficulties in the future in the UK and Europe with regard to, and I hate to say this word, but censorship.
Well, I think it's always good to be vigilant.
Mm-hmm,
I Censorship is not something that keeps me awake at night.
mm-hmm,
I think that we are, I've never experienced it in my job.
mm-hmm,
And we are a government body. I've never experienced it in my job. We're called an arm's length body, and that is truly the case. Um,
arm's length body. I like that.
with
Okay.
an arm's length body. And obviously, the arm has different lengths from
Mm-hmm.
time to time, but we are arm's length. We're also governed, we're a charity that's governed by a royal charter. So we are independent in terms of the work that we do around film, what we show and what is made. And I think it's our job to make sure that there is a breadth of experience reflected in what is made, what is preserved, what is programmed on our screens. So I don't worry about censorship right now. I guess we're focused on making sure that everyone feels there's something to watch and
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah.
But I think it was Christopher Nolan who said recently he worries that Hollywood is too political and shouldn't be political and should just kind of let cinema be cinema. And maybe it becomes political or you graft your politics onto it. But actually, the great thing about watching Jaws or maybe your Star Wars experience after the Vietnam War is that it's also a release.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So we must remember that a lot of people watch movies just to have an entertaining time and some enjoyment and some self-reflection and some quiet time or some noisy time. So we'll see. I don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. And we're very happy to be in America, and we're very happy to be collaborating with our American friends and our American peers and counterparts. That's felt really important this week.
It is very important. You've done a great job. So when it comes to something like TCM, which I'm very fond of because they have the power and the guts to make looking back an art form. Would you say that that is part of your job as an elemental force? I mean, I believe that, of course, we've talked about preservation, but just the joy of being able to look back at classic film and learn from it, Ben.
I'm such an evangelist for it because we can all have a great time and learn something by traveling back in time to somewhere that we haven't had the privilege of being ourselves. And it provides us with some perspective on where we are now.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that I see our job, and TCM do this very well as well. I see our job as encouraging people not to be fearful or put off or bored by the idea of watching an old movie.
yeah,
You know, this idea that an old movie isn't going to be as exciting as something that maybe got released on Friday or the screening on your TV, and that it's actually can be so powerful. And the likelihood is, if it stood the test of time, it's pretty great.
yeah,
So your money back guarantee is also stronger.
yeah,
So we you know we really believe in getting people into those cinemas, and young people are really engaging with older classic films. We see it in our cinemas. So yes, we really care. It matters for so many different reasons.
yeah. I see that too, and I'm very excited about that right now. There's a definite shift in the matrix. And I'm so thrilled when I see really young people and young filmmakers, people like Shane Fleming, a wonderful young filmmaker here who's embraced silent film. And he's getting jazzed by seeing as many films as he can here, even though he's a filmmaker himself and he's been featured at TCM many times. It's
Yeah.
it's a wonderful thing.
And I think that social media platforms like Letterboxd have done a really good job at socializing the idea of how you curate and share, your own lists of films. We ran a we one of the other things we do is we publish Sight and Sound magazine, which is the oldest film magazine in the world, and every decade we publish a list of the 100 greatest films of all time. Oh, you have a copy, I see, which is
Yeah,
great because we
excited.
gave them out during TCM. And every decade we publish a poll called the 100 greatest films of all time. It's always quite controversial, and there is no 100 greatest films of all time, obviously. But it's an opportunity for people to go in and tick off their lists or have their own film score through those lists. And we really notice that people come and watch those films and they can be quite young.
The content of your magazine is extraordinary. It's amazing. I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's pretty wide ranging. And it's good to have film writing, long form film writing. That's what it is. We celebrate, digging in a little bit. Hopefully without it being too dense that you can't wade through it.
No, 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 no. You've got the cerebral with the cool factor going here, Ben.
Right. Well, then we've hit the nail on the head. That's really great to hear.
And see, this is what I mean. The UK travels on a different plane. It just does. America is about razzmatazz. You guys are about cool factor with guts. And I've always loved that about, especially living in London, where there's just
Mm.
so much. I mean, we're almost overwhelmed by the riches of life in the arts. That's something
Yeah,
I have to
we're
say.
very lucky.
I had, and how I'm missed by not being there. I've just got to ask you, going forward, I mean, you've had your 10-year plan. Are you realizing it? And what's in store for Ben Roberts going forward?
Well, we are definitely making progress with our plan. The key goal of the plan is around transforming access to screen culture and making sure that it's not the privilege of an elite group. So that means opening up the archives, it means building our digital platforms, it means making sure that cinemas thrive and that film businesses thrive, that you've got opportunities to get into the the art of it and to the watching of it. So we're making progress. The archive, and one of the reasons we're here with BFI America, our a sort of advocacy entity here in the States, is because I truly believe that there is a lot more to be mined in the archive. A huge amount of it is not available to the public. It's
Oh,
just waiting to be unlocked. And that's ultimately a very expensive thing to do. So we are building up the profile of the archive and talking about the power of the archive, ultimately, so that we can talk to individuals, to government, to corporates,
mm,
and say, help us get it out into the world. It's the most fantastic collection of stories from the last 100 years. And it's important that we get them shared. So, in terms of what's next for me right now, I'm just really focused on that. That would be an amazing. I could retire happy if the archive was, firing on all cylinders.
that's really exciting. Okay, now I get it. Wow, very exciting. How do you deal with the stressors of this job?
Oh, I don't really find it very stressful. I find it quite, I mean, it has its stresses and strains, but the enjoyment of it overrides it. So, and I will say that it really helps if your office is in a cinema.
Yeah.
You
What
can always go and you can always go and watch something.
I would call that nirvana.
Yeah, so I can just walk downstairs and watch whatever's screening and turn my brain off.
Turn your phone off too.
Turn my phone off, turn my brain off.
Yeah. I've just got to ask you, just kind of for fun, when you're trying to develop a new project, for the BFI, I mean, I mentioned the Powell Pressburger project, which to me is so moving, and your collaboration with people like Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker, who of course have been married to Michael Powell. It's just so exciting, to see
Mhm.
this entire circle come together. But what's more, well, I guess fun, exciting to you? Is it the design in your mind? I mean, are you the guy who lays awake in bed and thinks, okay, how can I pull something together? Ah, yeah. Or is it the execution of that project?
Well, I mean, we have teams of people in the archive and the program who spend years and years researching what materials might be available to tell a complete story of a filmmaker or a genre, for example. I mean, we talk about filmmakers, we also cover genres and try to tell complete histories. So we have teams that work on these things for years and they have lists and they have dream projects. I don't really run the BFI in a way where I say, I want to do this. I love X. I let them do their work. And then I think to answer your question, I probably do enjoy then taking it out into the world,
Yeah.
talking about it, making, rattling the cage and making sure everyone sees it and being very evangelical about the work. I am interested at the one time I have done it, and I'm doing it right now. The one time where I have said, hey, how about we do this?
Mm.
Is something much bigger and more ambitious, which is to tell a complete history of British cinema
Whoa.
and pull it together in a way that speaks to all of the different elements of British filmmaking because it's so diverse, it's so international, it's so broad in genre. And as the BFI is approaching its centenary year in 2033, we're we're thinking about how might we do that in a way that audiences can navigate through because it's quite an overwhelming idea. So I presented that to our teams and they've kind of said, how on earth are we going to do that? But we're working. That would take several years, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. And pass the aspirin, please, because yeah, there might be a few headaches along the way. Is is,
Yeah.
is that something you see as a possible streaming platform, or will this take place mainly in theaters?
Well, I think both. We do have a streaming platform. We have a streaming platform in the UK called BFI Player, and we have a version of that platform in the US called BFI Player Classics. And that US version of Player is very focused, I think, on British classics. So we, if we run a big program, we try to get hold of the rights to screen as much of that program in cinemas and online. It's easier to get rights to screen things in cinemas one off than it is to put them onto a streaming platform. But we'll absolutely try because we think we people might be surprised by aspects of British cinema from the past and the journeys we've been on. I mean, not too long after Powell and Pressburger, you ended up in Carry On.
That's right.
So
Right. The
you know,
caravan.
there's so many different areas we could go
What
into if
a
we wanted to.
divergence. Oh my gosh. Well, I look forward to that.
Yeah,
Yes, Ben, that is epic. But something tells me that you can handle it.
I think so.
Hey, I've got to know if you had an opportunity to have dinner with anyone who has passed from this earth, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a celebrity or a filmmaker or whatever, who would you choose to have dinner with one evening?
Wow, what a question. Well, I think there's the people you admire, and then there's the question is whether you'd really want to spend time having dinner with them. Um, I've got lots of filmmakers I admire who've passed, including most recently David Lynch, and I wonder whether he'd have been a fantastic dinner guest. I think, you know what? I think given my role, I'm also really interested to maybe have met some of the greats of the studios, the big kind of Hollywood heavy hitters, the business people who ran the system.
Mhm.
Um, Lorraine Gary last night was talking about Sid Sheinberg, um, her husband, who I think ran MCA Universal for a while. And I was thinking, yeah, I think I probably could have had a good two-way conversation with a big head of a studio. That would have been fascinating to me, rather than me fanboying a
Right.
filmmaker I love and maybe letting myself down.
Or Daryl Zanuck, or, I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, any of the big producers. I think those would be yeah, I'd have a great time talking to them.
That would be interesting. And while you've just brought her up again, what did she have to say about the characters in Jaws that she couldn't work with or didn't get along with?
Well, she said I couldn't tell how tongue-in-cheek she was being about anything in particular, but she said, she had a big crush on Robert Shaw, and she said that she and Roy Scheider did not get along at
Ah,
first, initially. I don't know. Again, I don't know how tongue-in-cheek she was being. Um, but and that she loved working with Spielberg, which doesn't surprise me at all. She said he was great with actors, and you can see that in that film because the performances are so natural, and you often wonder in a lot of Spielberg's early films how much is scripted and how much he's allowed his characters to just talk to each other because they often are talking over each other and they're shouting at each other, and it feels slightly out of control and incredibly natural. And there's a number of scenes in Jaws where that's happening, and I really marvel at that.
hence the excitement. And of course, it was famous about the feud between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss, which always gave a little zing to every one of those scenes. So,
Yeah, oh, there's so much crackling on the screen. It's really brilliant. And there was something about the print last night because it's not a stereo soundtrack, it's a mono soundtrack, i.e., so it just comes out of the screen. There's no, because it's the original print, we're so used to sound coming from all around us now, but it just comes from the front. And everything for me felt slightly sharper and more clipped and did zing a little bit more because it got a bit cacophonous at points because it's just one track, not lots of mixed soundtracks. So the sound made it as special as the picture.
How fantastic. Wow. The
I'm
cacao.
telling you all the great things about the screening you missed.
I wish I'd been there. Ben Roberts, I got to tell you, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. That is simply fantastic. I've done many shows on how music and sound has bettered a film. And this is something I'm sure the BFI really, really cherishes as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And listen, just one more question because I know you're busy and you've got to scuttle off, I think, back to the UK.
Yeah, I gotta get to the airport.
So, if there is one word or phrase which really describes who you are to your soul, what would that be? First thing that comes to your mind.
Enthusiastic.
There you go. I love it. You've used the word evangelist many times in this interview. I love it.
Oh, am I right? Yeah, enthusiastic. I'm very enthusiastic, and I think I like to share that enthusiasm with people, which is what's been great about this trip this week.
Fantastic. Have you learned something from TCM that you're taking back that you'll put into work?
Well, the festival is incredibly well run. I'm so blown away by how they have pulled off the festival. I mean, we run a couple of festivals which are also incredibly well run, but I will take back to the team that this has probably been the most well organized festival I've ever attended.
That is amazing. And considering that TCM almost lost its footage a couple of years ago, that's high praise.
Yeah, right. No, it's great to have that sense of a friend and a partner who I think will probably work with again.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, please bring another presentation back. Bring Guillermo del Toro back because my
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to be a standing item.
that he was such a poet and such an empath, and I still think about the conjugation of you both as being so perfect that afternoon. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely of you to say, and it's lovely to talk to you.
And I have to say, it measures up to Made in England, which they showed last year. And it's wonderful that this has been included. So thank you for your offering, and thank you for your words, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me before you run off to the airport and back to the BFI. I want to thank you for everything and best of luck in all your work going forward. I'm sure, Ben Roberts, that you're going to take over the world because you're a prince amongst men in the film business. And thank you for that enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. That's so nice of you to say, and it's lovely to talk to you.
It's brilliant. Have a safe flight. And to all my listeners, I want you to check out the British Film Institute. Believe me, there'll be enough to look at to keep you occupied for a while. And thanks again to Ben Roberts, CEO of the BFI. And also to all my listeners, I want you to know if you go to centerstagewithpamelakuhn.com, you can find more interviews like this. Not as good as this one, but more interviews like this. And to everyone, stay safe out there. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.